Welcome back to another video. Today we're taking a look at Shinsekai Yori, but first I wanted to give a brief update on yesterday's giveaway video. In that video I said you needed to add me as a friend on Jimmer in order to enter into the drawing, but we found a better way of tracking it because people had problems with finding my profile, so you don't need to do that anymore. You just need to sign up or log in through the link I provided in that video or today's video, and of course post some pictures there, and that's really all you need to do. As of yesterday, we are halfway to meeting our first goal within a single day, which is great. We're really hoping everyone signs up for this because I'm looking forward to giving away a ton of anime at the end of the month. Moving on to the review, Shinsekai Yori is a sci-fi mystery drama set within a utopia. If you're just looking at the trailer or images of this, you might get the impression that it's actually set in the past, but it's set in the future. Honestly speaking here, this was an anime that I was really turned off to before I even started watching it just because I saw how the characters looked, and also the school setting that we see sometimes here. That was my first impression just from like looking at YouTube videos and stuff, but appearances can be deceiving, as this was the case with Shinsekai Yori. I realized this around 12 episodes in, and it was just that I wasn't seeing the bigger picture, so I decided once I finished it to rewatch it. And I know people out there were asking me, Bob, where is the Shinsekai Yori review? Because it has been a few weeks since I told people I would do it. It just took me forever to watch a total of like 50 episodes of anime. This takes a long time to do. Nonetheless, I'm glad that I stuck with it, and of course that I rewatched it just because there were still questions that I had that I needed to watch it again in order to understand. The majority of questions that I had the first time around pertained to the wonderfully complex and detailed setting, and of course some of the minor subplot. As far as the characters go, I basically pegged them when I first saw them. You know, it's pretty easy to see here that our protagonists are just an afterthought to the plot and setting. Oddly enough, this story begins in modern day Japan, where a few psychics lose control and start murdering everyone. It's pretty intense, but it doesn't last long. It definitely gets your attention for that first minute, and then it shifts us to the main time frame of Shinsekai Yori. And while this anime features a linear, plot-driven narrative, we often find in the first half of the anime these visions which give us various views of different points in time. While these visions aren't directly related to the plot, they are important for uncovering mysteries, and that's one of the reasons why I recommend watching it over, because many of these visions piece together some of the questions you may have later in the show. Our protagonists consist of a group of young psychic children, although Saki gets the most attention. During the first few episodes, these kids live pretty normal lives despite having psychic powers and living in a futuristic city without electricity in the future. Aside from paying attention to these strange and unique surroundings, I was mostly interested with these folk tales that the children would tell each other, as whether or not they would be true. Some of these folk tales revolve around these mythical creatures and missing children, as this becomes the first mystery that we encounter, as Saki is the last person to graduate from her school, but she remembers a lot of other people that basically disappeared and no one else remembers. This takes us to the mystery elements of Shinsekai Yori, and I'm not gonna lie, you're probably gonna have like 50 questions throughout the majority of the show because they love to just stack mystery on top of mystery and just give you so much to think about, and most of what you're asking is going to be answered within at least 3/4 of the anime, and some of the questions that might not be answered, you might need to rewatch it in order to see. Aside from the missing children, which actually become a frequent occurrence within the first half of this anime, there are several differences which stand out and make this setting unique, such as their mythical creatures, which we can sometimes see like in the middle of the road or like off somewhere. We'll kind of see them, but yet people don't actually believe that they exist. They just chalk it up to folktale. And of course, they have this future society which doesn't use concrete or electricity, and all of this is built upon the sweat and blood of these slaves called the monster rats who revere the humans to be gods. As the story continues, we encounter encounter several time skips which aid in just layering up all of these mysteries on top of one another. However, these time skips did little justice for our protagonists as we're introduced to them as children, and you wouldn't expect children in a story to have distinguishable personalities, but when you have these time skips, you would expect more from them in terms of personality and characterization as they are older. It's always better to have a character who's detailed in the beginning, and maybe he doesn't develop that much throughout the story, than to have a bland character in the beginning who develops into an older, bland character at the end. It's really unfortunate that the characterization is so weak for these characters, because that is really one of the most important parts of a story. Even though this is a plot-driven narrative, the intermittent time skips give the appearance of this being a coming-of-age tale, where a bit of characterization would have went a long ways, honestly. And it's not like they didn't have enough time to give these characters a detailed personality, because there were some episodes where they do crafts, and they're playing sports with their psychic abilities. There's like one episode where the whole episode is just like a sports game with them using their psychic abilities. Like, they wasted some time here. Of course, later on, after a time skip, there's this, they almost start to pursue a romance, which they don't really do that much with that, but having a romance here really isn't that big of a deal, because that is a natural part of people's lives. But there is this alteration within their body that causes them, when they're stressed out, to vent their frustration sexually within someone of the same sex as them, and they spend a little bit too much time with that, I think. It's important that it was there, because that was actually a clue to unlock some of the other mysteries later on, even though all that stuff is info dumped anyways. But I think they just spent a bit too much time on it, and they could have used their time a bit wiser when writing the story. Luckily enough, the rest of the show is solid, and my next biggest complaint is with the amount of info dumping, but even that comes with a bit of leeway. There were several episodes which were consumed by nothing but dialogue, with one character telling it to another, or one character telling it to a group, as the camera zooms back and forth, jumping around between the reactions of people listening and the person who's just deadpan telling them about everything. And of course, for some reason, when we have some of these info dumps, the camera will zoom in right on Saki's ass, and sometimes her crotch too. I don't know what was up with that.
Me. Even though I can't be saved.
While these info dumps are boring, I do recognize the fact that this is such a detailed world that if they would have went out of their way to actually show us these things instead of telling it, it probably would have ended up as being about 50 episodes. As for the conflict, obviously, if you have a society which prospers off of the sweat and blood of slaves, you will probably have them rise up against you eventually, and of course that is the case with Shinsekai Yori. While a few of these monster rats were significant to the plot, I want to talk about Squealer, because he was easily my favorite character of the show and quickly became my reason for continuing. We've all seen shows with bland and forgettable protagonists, but they have this antagonist which is meticulously detailed and outshines everyone. This is Shinsekai Yori with Squealer. While I am purposefully avoiding spoilers, Squealer has several motives. The only one I can tell you of, obviously, is because he had a lifehood of slavery. That's enough motive for anybody. Squealer is a multi-dimensional character who learns and develops in accordance. He works to exploit the human society in any way he possibly can. We haven't had a villain like Squealer since Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and that is saying a lot. While the second half of this anime is enveloped within the conflict between the humans and the monster rats, I think they did a great job of portraying the monster rats' perspective, as we see the differences between their several societies of just monster rats, and we also learn a bit about like the class system within their society as well. That was really interesting. I would say that the ending is fulfilling, and it answered the majority of questions that you have. Of course, you could probably just rewatch it then, because I'm sure you'd probably want to. Moving on to the presentation, the art and animation are both hit or miss. The art style is downright inconsistent, where it's beautiful plenty of times, but whenever we get to a point where it's just dialogue in a poorly lit room, it really starts to fall apart and look pretty bad. However, as far as the animation goes, I felt that the character animations were smooth, but they used too much CG when it came to these characters' psychic abilities, with the flying rocks and everything. We see that later on. It really does stand out, honestly. Other than that, this is a beautiful anime, and I appreciated the lighting here, just because they didn't have electricity and they relied on sunlight many times, so there was always like a different shade of sunshine that was shining into a room. That's just something that I appreciated there. But the soundtrack was also beautiful. It set the mood for all of the scenes. This is probably one of the better soundtracks that I've heard in a while. As far as the voice acting goes, I watched this anime twice, so of course, the first time I watched it with the Japanese audio, and the second time I watched this with the English dub. I would recommend that you probably want to watch this with the Japanese audio, but if you want to watch this with the English dub, it's not that bad after the first 6 episodes, but in the beginning, it was like mind-numbing at first, because we had the voice actors of our protagonists, which actually try and change the pitch of their voice in accordance with the age of the characters, and when they're really young like that, it was really like hearing Greg Ayres trying to make his voice as squeaky as he could. It was like nails on a chalkboard, honestly. And if you want to watch dub, I would recommend watching the first few episodes in sub and then switching over.
Hey, I've got to go home now.
All right, then. It's a tie.
No way! We were about to win! That means you guys have to surrender.
And of course, I need to give some credit to John Kaiser's role as Squealer, not just because he's my favorite character here, but because he did a brilliant job as he changed his speech patterns several times for the role. At first, when Squealer was talking to humans, he was very ignorant and purposefully humble in calling them gods and such, but as he talked to other members of his own society, the other monster rats, he would just bark orders at them and just talk down to them in a different language, mind you. And of course, as he becomes more intelligent, he starts to articulate his speech much better than he did before. And then there was this speech at the end, which everybody loves about Shinsekai Yori, one of everyone's favorite parts that I've talked to that's seen this anime, where Squealer, in the dub, he will begin speaking, and you can hear his frustration and anger slowly piling up until it overflows in this speech. It was Shinsekai Yori earns a performance level of 7.7 out of 10, which is really sad to say, because if it weren't for these bland protagonists, this could have easily been a 9 out of 10. It had that potential. It felt as if we were watching this coming-of-age story in this sci-fi universe with these characters that are just nothing more than a looking glass for the rest of the plot. So anyways, thank you for watching. A big thanks to Brady, the undefeated magician, on Patreon for requesting this video. Thanks, Brady. If you enjoyed this review, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't yet, and of course, rate the video. Also, be sure to enter into my anime giveaway, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video. I actually calculated this. If every one of my subscribers joined, I would be giving away $4,000 worth of anime, over $4,000 worth of anime to over 100 people at the end of the month. So we can give away some really, like, a lot of anime here. So anyways, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time when I review Dragon Ball Part 3.